Mike, if you're speaking, I think you got on mute.
Okay, Dan, I'll turn it over to you to do a welcome.
Now I have to get unmuted. There we go. Thank you so much, Mike. Hi, I'm Dan Wendt, your city manager. It's my honor and privilege to serve you. In addition to the Parks and Recreation Director, Steve Clark, our dedicated team of public servants on our city staff that you can see on the camera, and a series of community members who are serving on our resident steering committee. We have Mayor Richard Herbst, Council Member Mike Blakesley, and Council Member Corey Follick, who are taking an active role in helping the city of Vandalia to develop its first professional and comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan. You see, our park system enriches the lives of our residents and anyone who comes to Vandalia. And this year, City Council developed and adopted a series of policy goals to guide the strategic direction for our city government. And one of those goals relates to trust and confidence. And so I'm really excited that we're able to be here today to engage with you as our residents to help inform how we should strike the appropriate balance of inclusive community programs, facilities, and amenities from a long-term planning perspective. Throughout the process of this master plan, we're going to be developing a strategic roadmap for exploring the best practices in the Parks and Recreation discipline, engaging and learning from our residents through formal, informal, and also statistically valid methods, and then also guiding the public's investment through some data-driven decision making. In the end, we'll take the information from meetings like this one, our team's industry research, and we'll make a series of recommendations and concrete goals for the consideration of, and then the hopeful adoption from the Vandalia City Council. And so on behalf of our whole team at the City of Vandalia, I'd like to thank you for being our participants here tonight. Vandalia is a wonderful place to live, and as your city manager and a fellow resident, I aspire to continue our long tradition of being a top-tier suburb through top-tier city services. And so look forward to great feedback tonight. And again, thanks for being here. So Mike, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Dan. My name is Mike Snutz. I'm a principal with Pros Consulting, and Pros is fortunate to be leading the master plan effort in conjunction with city staff as well as the community as a whole. This evening is really going to be about providing an opportunity to gather some input from you all, as well as some live polling that we'll do throughout this evening. But most importantly, to kind of introduce us and the process to you, so you kind of understand a little bit more detail with regards to the outcomes that are going to be associated with this plan. So what I'm going to do is kind of share my screen, walk you through our presentation. I want to let you know I'm also joined by Phil Parnan. Phil is an associate principal with Pros Consulting. Phil will be leading, kind of monitoring all your questions and comments behind the scenes throughout this evening, and then we'll be kind of leading the facilitation of the Q&A based on what you type in at the end of this meeting. So as we get started here, I just kind of want to share my screen and we'll get moving here. So very quickly, just some real quick ground rules for these kind of meetings. Okay, there we go. So please use if you have any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This allows us an opportunity to capture in writing any and all questions, concerns, comments, suggestions that you have. Please don't use the chat function for these kind of questions. You're happy to chat amongst yourselves if you would like. However, in terms of asking us as a consultant team in the city, any questions, please use that Q&A function. So as mentioned, Phil will be kind of monitoring the questions as they come in, and we'll kind of group them together in kind of key themes. We will then at the end of the meeting kind of try to address many of these questions. However, we fully recognize that not everybody's able to join us. So what we are going to do is take all the questions that you provide to us and provide answers in writing through a document and post that on the city's website. We'll also be recording this meeting for anybody to view it later on as well. And then, as always, if connectivity is an issue, don't worry, please continue to log back in. If for some reason my microphone cuts out, just, somebody jump in, let me know, and I'll reset it, and away we go. So this evening is really just kind of an overview, as I said, of the overall project. Dan did a great job of kind of providing you a quick overview of how this project will go. But long story short, park and recreation system master plans are about the community, about the experiences most desired. And so the community engagement process, though will seem very heavy on the front end of this project, is something that we will include and look to gain your feedback and your trust throughout the entire process. I commend the city on including operational tasks because taking on and implementing a master plan in many cases comes back to the operations and the effectiveness and efficiency associated with the day-to-day operations, and then also taking on the implementation of a master plan. So we'll be looking at a lot of different buckets within the Parks and Recreation Department, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Inventory and assessment, this is really understanding all of the quote-unquote stuff, the built environment of your system. And what this in turn will allow us to do is really understand what it is that you have in your system, the value of that built environment, and also the condition of it. Level of service is really about how much stuff you have. We fully recognize that you're pretty much a landlocked community and that you're not really going to grow your park system per se, but that doesn't mean that you can't add additional doesn't mean that you can't add additional amenities to your existing park system. And then we'll also map that level of service to ensure that you have equity throughout the process. Cost estimating and funding, of course, is key components. We are all about trying to create realistic and implementable master plans, and that comes down to your ability to fund, both implement and sustain funding associated with any recommendations that come out of this plan. And then, of course, project timeline and questions. And just to kind of reiterate for folks, because this is a large public meeting, we do have all of your microphones and video turned off, simply because we've had, unfortunately, bad experiences with folks doing things on camera or saying things on camera that cause quite a bit of disruption. So that is the purpose for having the microphones and audio turned off and the cameras turned off. So our team, very quickly, Pros Consulting has been around for 26 years, and Pros really just works very closely with local governments with regards to the planning of parks and recreation systems. We are not landscape architects. Phil and I actually are both recovering park and recreation directors. So we have lived on that side of the table and kind of understand the operations of park and recreation departments from the inside out, having served in that capacity and those roles in previous lives, but also from a consulting perspective from the outside looking in. OHM is the firm that is the landscape architect engineering firm that is going to really be diving in on the park and facility assessments and the cost estimating associated with improvements. They are not able to join us this evening, but they are a very strong subject matter expert when it comes to understanding the physicalness of your park and recreation system, both through best practice design as well as understanding new trends as well. And then ETC Institute is our trusted partner for about 26 years as well. they will be administering the statistically valid survey, which I'll talk about here in a bit. So at this point, I want to hit the pause button and engage you all with our first poll. And so the way the whole polling will work is I will launch the poll. These are all kind of multiple choice questions. And within each poll, there could be 2, 3, 4 questions. This first poll is really around your utilization of the park and recreation system. So I will launch the poll. I will give you time to go through each of the questions, and then I'll close the poll, and then we will actually share the results with you in real time. So I'm going to launch the first poll. With about 30 seconds left, you will hear the Jeopardy music play. So that will be your cue to kind of start taking that test a little bit more quickly. So have at it. Remember to scroll down on the poll. This first poll has 3 questions to it. All right, clickers down. We'll end the poll here and share the results with you. All right, so the very first question in this poll was how often do you use any City of Vandalia parks, trails, rec facilities, open space? The number 1 response was weekly. The second response was daily or almost daily. So 68% of the community that is on this virtual community meeting are frequent users of the park and recreation system in your community. Another 16% use it on a monthly basis. In terms of the second question is what park amenities do you use most often? The very first, the top of the list there is the Vandalia Recreation Center. Almost half of you that took the poll are using the Vandalia Recreation Center. What has come in second there is playgrounds, and then third is the trail system. So again, the recreation center first, the playground second, and then the trail system third. And then in terms of quality, how would you rate the quality of the system? In looking at this, 78% of you are rating it as either excellent or good. Almost 50% of you are rating it as good, and another 30%, almost 30% of you are rating it as excellent. So this just kind of gives us an opportunity to understand, who is using the system, how frequently you're using it, what it is that you're using it, and your perceptions of the overall quality. So that is poll number 1. We'll be back to do a couple of more of these, one during the middle of the presentation and then towards the end. So I will get back to sharing my screen and move forward. So, a park and rec system master plan is less about really identifying the colors associated with any kind of playground that you put into your system, and more about understanding the amenities and the experiences that you want out of your park and recreation system. So in a really quick snapshot, and there's a lot of bullet points that I will not read, but this first third of this project is really about understanding the system today and the community's needs, and your experiences with it. Where we going really starts to understand and analyze what your needs are, and start to prioritize those, both in terms of the experiences that you want and then the amenities that are necessary to support those experiences. And last but certainly not least is, how do we get there? This is really about creating strategy that is implementable, data-driven, funding that's sustainable, to create a better park system for residents today, but also residents in the future. It's important to recognize that this is a 10-year planning horizon. So there will be recommendations that come out of this that are things that you can do almost immediately. And there will be other recommendations that will take potentially 7 to 10 years to implement. So recognizing that this is really not just about today, but it's also about future residents and your desires and needs, and understanding the trends in parks and recreation as well. So as mentioned a couple of times, this is really about getting your input through a holistic and continuous process. So in addition to such things as focus group meetings and stakeholder meetings, Dan mentioned that we are going to be doing community surveys. 2 very specific community surveys that we're going to be doing is an online survey. This will be open and available for everybody to participate in. It is something that will be available likely in April and May of this year. So just a couple, 3 months from now. We're also, as mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing a statistically valid survey. This is not a survey that everybody in the community will receive. It will be a random sampling of your residents from all walks of life, all geographies in terms of neighborhoods, in terms of where people live, age groups, families, household status, income levels, and race. And as mentioned earlier, ETC Institute is going to be managing that process for us. So what does a statistically valid survey mean? I'll give you a real quick story. It's hard to really understand all the algorithms behind that go into determining whether or not something is statistically valid. And you can Google this, but an understanding of if you lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and the question was asked you like chocolate ice cream, vanilla ice cream, or Neapolitan ice cream. Louisville, Kentucky has about 1 million people living in that community. As long as the surveys came back were representative of the community in terms of where everybody lived and in terms of all the demographics, it matches up with the community. The number of surveys that would need to be returned to statistically validate that result would be 375. So your community has about 15,000 people in it. We are going to seek to get at least 350 completed surveys from 350 households. So households typically, have more than one person in that. This survey is going to be The questions and answers are going to be developed as part of this initial conversation that we have with you all, and it will be developed in partnership with the city. It will then be mailed out to a random sampling of your community, and then you all will be able to respond either by mail, by phone, or online. We prefer, obviously, online. It makes it most efficient for you all, and it certainly makes it most efficient in terms of analyzing the results. This survey will likely hit the street at the end of March, beginning of April. And so, again, not everybody on this call, certainly not everybody in the community will receive one of these, but we certainly will let you know when the surveys have been mailed and when you can expect one in the mail. So you'll just want to be on the lookout. But again, once this statistically valid survey has closed, we will do an open-ended, everybody come one, come all online survey via SurveyMonkey. So again, statistically valid survey, end of March, beginning of April, online survey, end of April, beginning of May. So one key component of understanding the master plan is giving people an opportunity to weigh in and provide feedback along the way. So as we go through this presentation, you're going to see that there are a lot of technical components to this. What we want to do is present them to you all, the steering committee, and staff in what we'll call digestible chunks. What this simply means is that we will bring at key milestones the results of the public needs and the park assessment findings, and then we'll get into level of service and equity mapping, and then we'll get into capital improvements and operational improvements and recommendations, and then lastly the plan will be adopted. So the idea is to take all feedback and questions, concerns, comments, suggestions along the way, and also to give you an understanding of how all the information is working together in an iterative fashion to arrive at the recommendations in the implementation plan at the end of the process. This is not your needs. This is just an example of how we will end up presenting the data-driven prioritized community rankings for programs and services, as well as facilities and amenities. Again, let me emphasize, this is not yours. We have not collected any data to provide this as a way of saying that this is yours. This is just an example from another community from a master plan process. I will simply state that things that end up kind of in the high category are very important and also have a high unmet need. In other words, you as a community want the department to focus on doing more of the things in the high category. Medium category are more or less right-sized. You may need to expand a little bit in certain directions, but medium category prioritization simply means that the department has it right. The things on the low end of the spectrum are also things that in many cases the department has right. They might want to consider starting to downsize certain things. And also it indicates that if the department isn't offering this kind of program or it's not offering this kind of amenity, that it would not make fiscal sense to invest in something in the low priority. So I will reiterate this throughout the process, but I just wanted to give you an understanding of kind of what makes up high, medium, and low. Again, these are not your results, just an example from another community. So overall, the internal engagement is going to be in early 2022. This is talking with steering committee members, city staff, partners of the Parks and Recreation Department and the city. Then we'll do the full-blown community engagement in the spring and summer, and then again in the fall. The statistically valid survey will be this first quarter into the early part of the second quarter, and then the overall electronic survey is in the second quarter. All right, one next component before we jump into another set of poll questions is just so that you know that we are doing these operational assessments. Two real key components to this is one is evaluating programs and services. And this is an opportunity to understand better the back-ended processes that the department goes through in terms of offering programs and services, what they're doing right, what they're doing best practice, and where there are opportunities to improve upon it. There's a lot of different things that we will evaluate, but the idea is that when you get to implementing a master plan, you want to have your current house in order as best as possible, so that starting to take on new projects and new programs, you have an opportunity to do that very seamlessly and very effectively in terms of getting the community to engage. In terms of park and facility maintenance, I started my career as a recreation supervisor. So I was a programmer. And I think the one thing you realize as a programmer is that the first thing that you think about after you come up with an idea for a program is where you're going to have it. It's all about location, and that location needs to be well maintained. It needs to be safe. It needs to be in repair for that program to have a chance of being evaluated as a high quality program. If you have a space that's not designed for that program, if it's not clean, it's not in repair, it makes it really hard to get people to come back to that specific program. So really understanding the effectiveness and efficiency of the maintenance program for both parks and facilities is going to be another key component that we look at. Again, understanding your house, understanding the department and their abilities to manage both programs as well as facilities and parks is paramount to implementing successfully a master plan. All right, so another live poll. Let me stop this, jump into another live poll, and let's get to what we'll call communication and barriers. So these questions are about understanding how you would prefer to learn about parks and recreation as provided by the city of Vandalia. And then the second question is really going to be about what's the largest barrier that prevents you from using parks and recreation more. So I will launch the poll. The first question is multiple choice. The second question is a single choice. Have at it.
Mike, I see that somebody has stated that the survey might not be working.
Yeah, I saw that as well, Dan, but I also see that other people are still being able to take it, so it just could be a connectivity issue. Okay, I will end the poll now and then get started. Hold on one second here. I'm going to relaunch the poll just very quickly to allow a few other folks the opportunity to try to answer very quickly here. Actually, I am not going to do that because that will clear all of the existing polling results. So I apologize. I don't want everybody else to have to take the poll again. So I'll share these results. I do apologize. Typically, it's a connectivity issue that prevents folks from taking the poll. So, so here are the results. The 3 most preferred ways to learn about Vandalia's Parks and Recreation system. Number 1 is email by far. Number 2 is the city website. And then number 3 is signs and flyers in parks and rec facilities. So part of why we ask this question is one of the huge reasons why people don't have the ability to participate more is simply that they're not aware. But we also recognize that there's a lot of different marketing tools and there's a lot of information exchange. Being able to help the department hone in on the most effective and efficient ways to communicate with you all what's going on in the system is a big reason as to why we ask this question. Awareness is usually a big reason as to why people don't participate more. So kind of on that note, what are the reasons that prevent you all from using the system more? The number 1 reason is I'm too busy. And that is typically the number 1 answer. My response to that is that if the department was offering the things that the residents want to use, you all would typically make time to engage. Because people have a tendency to prioritize things. That is not for everybody. But again, that's part of why we want to get an understanding of what those barriers are. So I'm too busy simply means that, time is a premium. But if the department was offering something that was very close, near and dear to your heart, it's likely that you would make time to participate. Another high choice, the other two highest choices are fees are too high. And we will work through that in terms of the operational assessment. And then tying it back to the first question in this poll, I do not know what is offered. So that is about creating awareness and marketing. So we thank you for providing this. I will tell you that one that I missed here down below on the very, very, very first question is actually social media was the number 1 way in which people want to learn. So to kind of restate the top 3, social media, email, city website. Those are the top 3, as well as then signs and flyers in parks and facilities. The key takeaway here is that the city and the department are the ones you want to hear the information directly from the city in terms of what's going on in these manners. So that's excellent and great information for us to know going forward. Again, these results are just from the folks that are on this community meeting. We will ask very similar questions of the community as a whole as part of the statistically valid and the online surveys. All right, so we will get back to the presentation. We'll have one more poll at the end. So a next big step after we get through the operational assessments is evaluating your existing conditions. So what does this really mean? This is about the inventory of your park and recreation system. Identify where all the parks and trails are, the size and the level of service of all of those existing open spaces, photo library, and a description of each. The other key component here, though, is it's great to know what you have, but we need to know what the condition is of it. We were there just last week, it seems, but yes, it was just last week, and we actually couldn't get out to see your system because, of course, it was there was snow on the ground, and there really wasn't a great opportunity to get a good look. But in the next coming months, as winter, we turn the page on winter and get into spring, OHM will be out assessing the not only capturing the inventory, but really understanding the condition and the condition rating of your system. The key here is to recognize that everything that park systems have a lot of what we'll call investment or built environment. And sometimes we think of parks as just a lot of green grass and trails, and trees and flowers and playgrounds. But there, if you go to any park, you'll realize that there's a lot of built environment, from trash cans to picnic tables to picnic shelters to benches, water fountains, restrooms. All of that stuff at some point was identified as a need, and it was built and put in the ground and put in your parks. The key here is to recognize that none of that stuff lasts forever. And so we want to get an understanding through these inventory and assessments of what are the things in your park system, all that built environment, all that stuff, what needs to be replaced in the next 10 years? And should we be replacing it, or is there a better potential use of that space in a park with a different amenity? Now that demographics have changed and so on and so forth. So again, it's really important to understand the condition. This ties back to safety. It ties back to use of a park. It ties back to having a high quality experience. Some of the new park design trends that we are going to look at when we start to assess your parks is, where are there opportunities for better seating? What does that look like? Nature play is certainly an emerging trend that moves beyond just kind of a typical playground structure and creates play using, more natural elements. Opportunities for such things as, fitness spaces that can be spread out. A really kind of cool new trend is what we call kind of fitness courts, so to speak. And so these courts are very much like adult playgrounds. We have all been to gyms that kind of have, in some cases, kind of CrossFit training elements. This allows parks to be used in this way as well. Theming of playgrounds down here at the bottom left really starts to make you feel as if every park's a little bit different, and that the playgrounds aren't the same from park to park to park. And then lastly, obviously, all-inclusive design. This have become really, really important in understanding not just social equity, but physical, mental, intellectual, emotional barriers that prohibit people from using parks. Integrating those kind of designs that create a more inclusive experience for the community as a whole are some of kind of the key trends that we'll be looking at and seeing where there are opportunities within your park system to incorporate some of these, all of these, or even some that we're not showing here on the screen. So level of service is really about understanding the amount of stuff, any one thing that you should have in your park system. It could be playgrounds, it could be picnic shelters, it could be athletic fields, facilities, and so on and so forth. There's a lot that will go into determining level of service and fully recognizing that one of the things that we will evaluate is not just park acreage, but also the inventory of your amenities. At the end of the day, we're going to kind of go through a process that brings together a lot of different data points to say, how much additional parkland should you have, and or how much additional amenities should you have in the next 10 to 15 years. That comes back to understanding what your current service level is and then what your future level of service is. One key driver for this is going to be community need. It is not going to be the end all be all, but it is a big variable in terms of understanding the character and the experiences that your park system will provide. On top of that, we're going to map all of this level of service. So one of the things that we want to understand is, do you have equity in terms of access to playgrounds? Do you have equity in terms of athletic fields? Do you have equity in terms of access to picnic shelters? There may be certain things like having a 100-acre athletic complex makes a lot of sense from an efficiency and an effectiveness perspective to have all of your athletic fields in one park in one geographical area of your community. But other elements such as playgrounds and picnic shelters, we want to have equity and have people have access regardless of where you live in your community. And another key component is what is your access to it? We recognize that in many cases, just because of the climate, that you in fact are going to have to drive to a park, but there are going to be other opportunities in times of the year that it would be nice to safely walk or ride a bike to a park. So where are there opportunities to improve that kind of access to your park system so that it's more multimodal, that people don't always feel like you have to get in a car to get to your parks. So again, the maps will start to understand where there are barriers to accessing parks, but also understand where we should consider new amenities in your park system so that it's equitable for folks regardless of where you live in the community. So kind of bringing us home here a little bit is capital improvements and financing the plan. So capital improvements are really one-time dollars that mean that you're going to construct something new. It could be lighting, it could be fencing, it could be a playground. That's what a capital improvement is. It's really about what's the investment in the infrastructure in your park system. So we are going to look at this, but we're going to look at it through the lens of what we call the total cost of ownership. So a key driver is obviously determining the what associated with your capital investment. So what are we going to construct? What are we going to replace? What are we going to build new? And then the cost associated with it. A key driver too, though, is that even though you build something, that's all well and dandy, but we need to make sure that you have the ongoing operations and maintenance resources necessary to support and maintain that capital investment. Going back to what I said earlier, capital investments, infrastructure, nothing lasts forever. And keeping that in mind, if you don't have the operations and maintenance dollars to support that capital investment, you in fact will not, that will not even come close to lasting forever. In fact, it'll quote unquote wear out much longer, in a much earlier time frame than its expected life cycle. The other key component to total cost of ownership is recognizing that not only does nothing last forever, but at some point it has to be life cycle replaced. So I'll give you an example. A playground is expected to last for 15 years. And if you have playgrounds in your system that are older than 15 years, typically they're in a position and a condition where they need to be life cycle replaced. One of the things that we want to try to set up as part of this project is that when you make an investment in something that's new, that you also set aside some dollars along the way, knowing that in the future you're going to have to replace it. Doesn't mean that you have to set aside 100%, but it's a lot better that if a playground costs $250,000, with, a good shade structure or something along those lines, that at the time that you need to replace it, let's say you have 125 of that 250,000. That would be a great start as opposed to starting from scratch. So again, total cost of ownership is really important. Another way to kind of state it in our language is simply buy a new car, not have enough money to change the oil, rotate the tires. That car is not going to last you very, very long. Everything in a park system falls under that umbrella. You have to have the operations and maintenance dollars to support the capital investment going forward. So what we are going to do then is we're going to set up your capital improvement plan or the cost estimating in what we'll call 3 buckets. One is just the things that need to be life cycle replaced over the next 10 years. A restroom for a restroom, a playground for a playground, a picnic shelter for a picnic shelter, athletic field lighting for athletic field lighting. The second bucket is where there are opportunities to look at your existing park system and better meet community need. So an example could be that some of your parks, like what you have at your athletic complex, it has a loop trail around it. A lot of people, one of the first things that people love to do is walk for exercise. We're going to learn that as part of the community engagement process. But sometimes people just want to be able to walk down the street to their local park or their neighborhood park and walk around that, as opposed to getting in the car and going to the athletic complex. So that would be an example of what we'll call an expanded service or a strategic change to your existing park system. The third bucket in your case is likely going to be, what are the parks that we need to just completely renovate? Maybe the demographics around it have changed. The experience desired by the community have changed. And so that's going to be the visionary bucket. It's going to be larger projects, larger dollars, more complete projects. And the reason that we love to break these up into 3 buckets is that there are typically different funding strategies associated with each one of these buckets. So along those lines, what we are going to do is work with city staff to understand whether the most implementable and sustainable funding strategies for the park system. There are going to be funding strategies that are tried and true that the city will continue to do to reinvest in your existing park system. But there may be some funding strategies that are just new, that you maybe have thought about trying, but you haven't tried. There's over 140 different ways to fund a park system. Not all of those are implementable for Vandalia, but we want to identify which ones really are, so that you're not putting all your eggs in 1 or 2 or 3 baskets to fund the improvements that are going to come out of this. It will take some creativity. It will take some strategic thinking. It will also understand the city's financial capacity to implement the capital improvement plan. And again, this is really about creating something that's implementable and realistic and sustainable for you within that concept of total cost of ownership. So all of this kind of culminates in what we'll call an action plan matrix, strategies, action plans, who's responsible, prioritization based on start date and funding availability, and then performance measures. How do you know that you accomplished what it was that you set out to accomplish? We will work through this with staff upon adoption of the master plan, so that we do it once, we do it right. This becomes a Bible for the department and the city to continually refer back to every 3 months, every 6 months, every year, until you get to the point where you're checking off a lot of those boxes. So all of this kind of culminates into a master plan document. All right, so one last poll, and hopefully everybody has the opportunity to participate in this one. This one is about future needs. So there's going to be 3 questions. First question is really specifically about what are the programs and services you're most interested in. The second question is about the 2 most important improvements the city can make related to Parks and Recreation. And the third question is specific to the Vandalia Recreation Center. Since a lot of you use that, I am sure a lot of you will have some feedback on this. So I will launch the poll. I will give you a little bit more time because 2 of these 3 questions are multiple choice. All right. Have at it. Okay, folks, I will end this poll and share the responses with you. We really appreciate your time and attention to doing this. All right, so share results. The first question is, what programs and services are you and members of your household most interested in participating in? So you can see by the blue bars that there's a lot of different opportunities provided, and certainly more than what's on this list. But you see a lot of blue bars, stretching halfway across the screen. The top two are community special events and fitness and wellness. The third is outdoor adventure, nature education, and conservation. One advantage that you all certainly have is your access to Five Rivers Metro Parks on the eastern edge of your community. So that certainly goes a long way to helping fill that need. Does not mean, though, that the city cannot, get into that if that is something that is most desired by the community, or create stronger partnerships with Five Rivers Metro Parks to do so. So again, community special events, fitness and wellness, outdoor adventure, nature education, conservation are the top three. In terms of the two most important improvements that the city of Vandalia can make over the next 10 years, I know this is a really tough question to ask, pinning you down to just two. But the very, if I'm scrolling down here quickly, number one is basically take care of what you already have. Maintain and improve existing park and recreation facilities. Give me a second here to make sure I get number two right. And it looks like number two is renovate Castle Hills Pool, which kind of falls very much in line with the very first choice, but it's very specific to the pool. A third choice is going to be replace playgrounds and structures. And then tied for, I think, fourth is going to be connect parks to trails and public spaces via multi-use trails, as well as add an outdoor splash pad that's free to the public. So again, a lot of different opportunities here. We recognize that this list is somewhat limited. Greater and more choices will be offered as part of the surveys that we do, both statistically valid and online. And then lastly, should the city of Vandalia convert the recreation center into a 24-hour fitness facility? 2/3 of you say no, 1/3 of you say yes. Again, this will be certainly a question that we consider for the other surveys. So again, I just want to reiterate regarding the whole live polling that this does not define and determine the direction that the city is heading. However, what it does do is it helps to inform and start to create some key emerging themes that we need to continue to circle back on as part of our ongoing conversations with the community, as well as then the surveys. So we really appreciate this feedback. We really appreciate your time and attention to doing this. Again, it's not the end all be all. We need to find out from thousands of other folks what you love to do and what you want the city to do for Parks and Recreation. But again, it's a really good start to helping us understand where your values are when it comes to Parks and Recreation and your priorities. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to get us home here and then turn it over to Phil to bring us home with regards to questions. So the overall project timeline here, we're doing this virtual community meeting tonight. We will do a second series of meetings, as said previously, along with another virtual community meeting to present a much more holistic approach to public needs, as well as the park and facility assessments in May and June. Key technical findings, this is really around level of service and mapping and operational assessments. This will be mid to late summer. The meeting series 4, again, all of these will include virtual community meetings, recommendations and implementation plan, really a focus on capital improvements, the funding strategies associated with it, and an idea of what the implementation strategies are going to be. And then lastly, the plan for adoption to the Park and Rec Advisory Board, Steering Committee, and of course, City Council in late fall. So as we kind of wrap up I'm going to say this, and I'll say this again as we wrap up. After we're done kind of providing some Q&A here, we will leave the Zoom open for you to provide any additional questions, concerns, comments, suggestions for about 15 minutes or so after we say quote unquote good night. And then, as we said, we will take all of the questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, respond to them in a document form, and post it on the city's website by Tuesday, March 1st, along with the meeting's recording. So we will, that is kind of our next steps in wrapping things up. At this point, what I want to do is turn it over to Phil to kind of walk us through a process of responding to your questions or comments. Please keep in mind, we're not going to answer every question verbatim, but Phil's has been monitoring the questions as they come in. He's kind of going to group them, around some kind of key themes, and either then myself, Dan, or the Parks and Recreation staff will respond to those here in a second. So, Phil, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry, I just had to unmute. So categorize these into a few areas that have come up quite frequently. So we'll first start with parks, which can cover a lot given what we typically see within parks, but we do have questions regarding inclusivity and accessibility as part of parks. And that is, what are the plans for updating playgrounds and buildings with inclusive features and ADA accessibility? And also, would there be an opportunity for Helke Woods to incorporate a sensory garden? Go ahead, somebody.
Oh,
Dan?
okay.
Dan, I'll let you jump in and I can add to it.
All right. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. One of the things that I'm really excited about with the inclusivity initiative is that we've already invited the Montgomery County Board of Developmental Disabilities and some of their staff in to help advise our strategic development. And the superintendent, Dr. Pamela Combs, has come on to our steering committee for this very project. And so there are a couple of options, and we're hoping that we'll be able to make those sort of inclusive playground features, not just be incorporated into one park, but some stuff in all parks, including picnic tables, amenities that are at the VRC. And so, with regard to that, we've also met with some of the staff at the Vandalia Butler City School District, where we've held meetings to not just talk about the public parks, but also the school playgrounds and really any sort of public space. So leveraging that expertise that they have at the county to advise the way that we develop. With regard to, sensory gardens, those, honestly, when we come into this process, I want to hear what it is that the community wants. And sure, we're going to try to consider all of those parts and, research if that's something that we can provide. So that's a great topic to bring up. And I don't know right now, but that's what this project is about, is figuring out what we should be doing.
Thanks, Dan.
So, Mike, did you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to make mention that inclusivity is it's more than just an emerging trend. It's a best practice trend, and understanding that we need to recognize that there is diversity out there, and that we need to put plans in place to create an equality of experience for all. But lastly, we need to make sure that everything is inclusive, and what that means is it gives people a sense of belonging. They don't feel as if they're an outsider, or that you're feeling as if you have to make special accommodations for folks. It's about that becoming best practice and mainstream, and that is certainly something that we absolutely need to focus on as part of an outcome of this plan.
All right, we've got a couple of questions here specifically for trails. So let's get started with that. Is there any progress on making it easier to connect with the bike path from Vandalia. Dan, I know that you answered that in typing, but I think doing it verbally for anybody that's watching this later would be beneficial.
Yes, absolutely. We are so excited. We've partnered with Five Rivers Metro Parks and won a $2.1 million grant to cover the vast majority of a multi-use trail. It's part off-street facility, part on-street facility that'll basically trail from where Frickers is, around the Platte, down South Brown School, out National. Some of that'll be off and through Taylorsville Metro Park and connect right into the Great Miami River Trail. And so one of the things that we're looking at, I think that'll be huge, especially since we got outside funding for it. It's currently under design and it's anticipated that that will be built out in 2024. One of the other exciting things is maybe in the next, in 2023 or 2024, we'll look at doing a full-scale connectivity plan to help advise the way that we plan our streets, our sidewalks, the rest of our connections to make it easier for active transportation. And so it'd be nice to be able to always get to a park, to always get to a public facility without having to jump in the car necessarily.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next, we have another question regarding trails, and it's about, I guess, an odor that individuals are picking up somewhere along the Taylorsville State Park with that connection. Can anyone speak to if there's been a plan to try and correct that, or if that's even an issue?
Absolutely. One of the things to understand about the wastewater utility in the city of Vandalia is that we have a shared joint venture with Huber Heights and Tip City. And so on the east side of town, there's what's called a large interceptor sewer. It's a 30-inch main that goes from Tip City, brings their their wastewater down, connects with Vandalia, and then eventually goes to the wastewater treatment facility on Old Needmore Road. In 2020, there was I believe 2020, there was a partial collapse of one of the sewers that has since been repaired. And so if you were out in Taylorsville Metro Park, you would have seen some of that construction. It was the repair of that. One of the really good things that's going on is Governor DeWine came out last year to Vandalia to present Vandalia and the Tri-Cities Wastewater Authority with a $2.4 million grant. And that is to conduct sewer reinforcement. It's called cured in place lining, SIP lining. That will hopefully prevent those sort of problems in the future. But of course, there are certain detention areas within the sewer system and certain venting that takes place. And so that is one of those parts that on the east side of town that may or may not remain a challenge, but I think will improve.
Thank you. Also, one question for parks and open areas: has the city considered autonomous mowers?
What is that? That's an advertisement from a guy that always posts about autonomous mowers. Who sells them, I think. No, I'm not going to have a mower that runs by itself, chopping up kids' feet. But in some places, realistically, without joking, there's big slopes, and you put big wide slope mowers on to avoid any sort of loss that could come from injury. And so that leveraging of technology can be good. If they get to a point where that autonomous mower can keep Art Park looking pristine without running into any of our beautiful sculptures and facilities, then heck yeah, it's something we could look at, but it has to be cost justified. I don't want it to look like a superfluous expense when, compared to what personnel expenditures are. So we might look at it.
All right. So wanting to know if, we've got a question wanting to know, has there been consideration to making the use of the recreation center and Castle Hill Pool a resident-only facility?
That is something that we look at pretty consistently. Probably half of the revenue for the Vandalia Rec Center and half for Castle Hills Pool comes from non-residents. And what we try to do is kind of look by zip code and say, okay, is it Vandalia and Butler Township? thinking that all of our kids go to the same school, that it is one big community. But even taking out Vandalia and Butler Township aside, that cost of entry or that subsidy based on the income tax or the property taxes that we would have to leverage would be pretty costly. So that is a tough policy question that we do a fair amount of research in, and we're considering right now, both internally as staff and trying to give city council the right information they need to make the best decision for Vandalia and for the sustainability and financial sustainability of the city.
Yeah, so one thing, certainly some of the operational questions regarding mowing, and certainly this question we will look at when we look at the operational assessments. But I think it's important to recognize that Vandalia has about 15,000 residents. And we also know that your community isn't going to grow all that much over the next 15 years. You're going to be a community that very much ages in place. And so one of the things that always has to be considered is Parks and Recreation is one of those few departments in the city that has an opportunity outside of taxpayer dollars to generate revenue to offset expenditures. And that is done through user fees, rental fees, admission fees, memberships, and so on and so forth. So what you end up with is what's called a net general fund tax subsidy. So the department's budget, for example, I'm just going to throw a number out there. It's way more than this, but it might be $1 million. But if you generate $500,000 in what we'll call user fees, that means that the taxpayers are supporting, generally speaking, the operations of Parks and Recreation by about $500,000. When you add in the fact that about the $500,000 that is coming in through fees, if half of that is coming in from non-residents, again, that also has a tendency to lighten the load that the residents have to carry to provide such a holistic, excellent, wonderful park and recreation system. I want to say this, I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say this now. For a community of 15,000 people to have a 60,000 square foot recreation center, a golf course, a senior center, a 100-acre athletic complex. We do work all over the country. And there are communities 4, 5, 6 times your size in terms of population that don't have the offerings that you all have. And so recognizing, though, that you have only 15,000 people, if it was just up to the 15,000 people to support and use those facilities and those amenities, as well as then pay into the using of those, there would be a much larger burden on taxpayers to fund all of those operations. So it is something that we're going to look at, but philosophically, I think the city has developed and taken on many of those facilities with the understanding that they would be available for residents as well as non-residents.
All right. Thank you for that, Mike. So another question we just had come up that is specific to the community center and aquatics, and I'm not sure if it's been answered in your comments. I was capturing a lot of questions, so I just want to make sure. Have there been any conversations about creating a sliding scale or lower cost so more of our citizens can utilize the fantastic facility?
We have an income-based program that's in place for the Vandalia Rec Center, and that also is based off of the school lunches, and I'll make sure that in our comments that we post what that program is and the details of it specifically. One of the things that I'm really excited about is City Council decided to allocate $20,000 this year through the American Rescue Plan funds that the city received, specifically for scholarships for recreation programming at the rec center. And so our staff is really excited about that. In fact, if you look at the Vandalia Rec Center Facebook page today, or you look on the rec center website, that sign up and that link to apply for the scholarship funding is actually up and open right now. So that's something we're really proud about. We're very committed to making sure that both City of Vandalia children and also Butler Township children have access to good rec league programming. And so that's super important to us as well.
Thank you. So we've got a couple of questions around programs and events. They're both regarding events. So they're wanting to know, are there any plans to create any large scale events through the parks, such as a holiday light display? There's an interest in bringing people together within the community and the potential of bringing individuals from out of town to enjoy what you all have created. And if in addition to that, events with music and food trucks, are those types of events planned as well?
Absolutely. Phil, it's great. I'm thinking about the background that's right behind you, which is our wonderful art park. This year, and actually the Dayton Development Coalition has just released their recommendations for a public project advisory process called PDAC. And so we submitted stating that we'd like to request out of the state capital bill $400,000 for $400,000 to build out the stage at Art Park. And my indications initially from Representative Phil Plummer and Senator Niraj Antani is that we received that recommendation from the Dayton Development Coalition, but also we think that that $400,000 to build that out will be allocated. Last fall, we had our first real big fall fest with inflatables, with music. We certainly want to grow that with that build out, expansion of seating, making it ADA accessible. You can see in the background of your image that we just paved all of that out this year. But one of the other things is we have a community events calendar on the website. And there's also this printout that you'll see around town that has all of the Chamber of Commerce, the City of Vandalia, the Butler Township community events that are listed out. And so those things are going on and they're really exciting. And we look forward to growing them because we have a very vibrant and active community. And so the more the merrier.
We did have another trails question pop up that I think is actually a good one. Has there been any thought about having a facility in close proximity to the trails that would be a bike rental station?
Hey, that sounds like a great private business. I'd love to see that. I'd love to work with an entrepreneur to do some sort of bike sharing and rental. I'd want to look at what the business plan is to see the city's involvement with it. But if there's a interested entrepreneur who wants to talk about how the city might help them leverage that sort of quality of life project, we're definitely open to that.
Nice. We've got an operational question. The viewers wanted to know, are there any thoughts about coordinating with Butler Township residents on the future of the park system?
Yeah, absolutely. We have this public meeting, which is open to anyone. And certainly we'll be conducting in-park community events. We also have members of the school district and teachers who are participating in our steering committee. And then, of course, we will have a convenience survey, an online survey. As you mentioned, there's the distinct statistically valid survey and then the online survey that we would absolutely encourage Butler Township residents to participate in because we do want that feedback.
Yeah, and I think I could add, I think one of the components, of course, from a recommendation perspective is how are you going to implement? And that implementation question, in some cases, gets answered by who can you partner with? And so that partnership analysis will be something that we look at as part of the operational analysis and then circle back on it when we come back to recommendations. So kind of understanding who your potential partners are, whether that be school district or whether that be Butler Township or Five Rivers Metro Parks or larger, economic development opportunities. We can't lose sight of the fact that obviously I think parks has an impact on economic development in a community and vice versa. And so where there are opportunities to leverage those partnerships that make strategic sense, and they can be sustainable and win-win. It's really important that we ensure that the partnerships are win-win, that both parties have enough skin in the game, and so that they see the value of the partnership, not just short-term, but long-term as well.
One last question that we have is specific to how is the city and how will we incorporate as part of the plan differences in people's park usage since COVID versus pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID?
That is a wonderful question that I wish we had all the answers to. We can tell you that obviously, I'll give you one really good example that we don't know whether this uptick is sustainable or not. But golf had been a sport that continued to decrease in participation. Maybe not necessarily in Vandalia, but generally speaking across the country, the National Golf Foundation started to count participation in golf, not just on-course activities, but off-course activities such as like top golf facilities, to continue to buoy participation numbers. Now, once the pandemic hit, rounds of golf played skyrocketed over the last 3 years. We're very interested to understand if that is a trend, is a short-term blip related to the pandemic, or if it actually is going to be one of those things that sticks. Another good example is that tennis has approximately, before the pandemic, across the country, about 17.5 million people participating in tennis on an annual basis. During 2020, and then again 2021, that number has jumped to almost 21 million people across the country participating. Does that mean that we need more tennis courts? We're not sure. But we certainly have some data, and we need to continue to understand as we go through this year, as things are going to normalize a little bit more than they were in 2020 and 2021, as to whether or not those shifts in participation are going to stick, or if it was just people gravitating towards those kind of recreational opportunities because there other opportunities were taken away from them. So again, it is certainly something that we will continue to monitor. I wish that we were out of the pandemic. I wish that we had 5 years of data, 2 years in the pandemic, 3 years out of the pandemic to understand. But again, it's certainly something that is going to influence some of the decisions and recommendations that come out of this plan. It's a great question. And I think we all wish that we had a crystal ball when it came to it.
Yeah. Mike, I turn it back over to you so that we can go ahead and wrap up. I know that you still wanted to keep the question and answer open for a little bit longer for people to type, and we'll respond to those in writing, correct?
Yep. So that's going to be kind of my last comment, and I'll turn it over to Dan to close us out, bring us home. But again, any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions that you would like to type into the Q&A boxes there, please do so. I will leave this open for another 15 minutes or so for you to do so. As a reminder, we will then compile all of these questions and provide written responses to them, post them on the city's website along with the presentation and along with the recording of this meeting, so that those you can go back and look at it. You can scroll through to the Q&A section if you would like, and then they'll also then, for others who weren't able to participate this evening, they'll have an opportunity to view it at their leisure. So just wanted to share that with you. We really thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this exciting plan for you. There's a lot of passion. You have a great system, and we just want to help you take it to that next level. I'll turn it over to you, Dan. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks, Phil. We appreciate the pros consulting team. We looked really hard at a couple of groups, and you look at pros consulting and the work that they've done, not just regionally with Five Rivers and a few other well-known park systems, but also nationally. And so the big thing about this process that I would say is type in your questions. Even if we can't respond tonight, we will get responses that are together. And we want to consider the totality of the feeling of the community so that you get a park system that not only serves you throughout the entire life cycle and helps you live to be 100 and be independent and well, but also one that gives you access to natural resources and promotes wellness in general. And I would just thank you. I love this community. I love Vandalia and this engaged citizenry that we have. And so please continue to check in periodically, participate in our public events that we have up and coming. And if you can do that, I can guarantee that we're going to produce a plan document and strategic roadmap that's going to yield a park system and outputs that you're going to continue to be proud of, and it'll build on a long tradition of just improving quality of life in Vandalia. So that's it.
Thank you, Dan. Hey, one last housekeeping measure, folks. I appreciate you all staying on. We will do it, obviously, additional virtual community meetings throughout this process. Because you registered, we have your email addresses. One of the advantages of this is that we'll be able to directly invite you to the next virtual community meeting. And so you will receive an email from us to register for that next one, which will happen sometime in May or June. So be on the lookout for that. Be on the lookout for the surveys. We'll be able to kind of keep you in the loop along the way, beyond the social media, city's website, and so on and so forth. So we'll be able to communicate with you about the logistics of the project and how you can engage along the way. So again, we appreciate you taking the time to register and, of course, participate tonight. Great questions. Really love the answers to the polling. Do apologize for those that had challenges with the polling. But at the same time, we appreciate your involvement and look forward to continuing to work with you all. Thank you. Have a great evening. I will leave this open for another 15 minutes or so if you have any additional questions, concerns, comments, suggestions. Have a great one.